Hey, it's Matt from Custom Car Grills with a mesh grill install for the non-turbo first-gen Veloster. If you need help getting the bumper off of the car, I linked a video to help with that in the description below. Once you have the bumper off, flip it around and then let's start removing the fasteners that are holding the stock grills to the bumper. During this step, I'm going to remove both the lower and the upper grill. After I have the screws removed, then I'll use flathead screwdrivers to pull back the bumper clips on the side and push them out through the lower grill. Once I have one started, I like to keep it loose by sliding another screwdriver under the area as I move around to the other clips. Then when there's a few loose on the side, it's usually possible to pull up some on the side to release the ones in the center. Sometimes a firm tug on the lower grill is needed to release the clips, and if any are stuck, then you may need to go back using some screwdrivers to release them. The lower grill is now out, and the upper grill should be removed using the same method by releasing the clips that are holding it to the bumper. And now it's time for a big cut on the bumper. Please take note of where I'm cutting here on this top edge. It's pretty important. There's a very clear line here that I'm going to be following, shown directly under my fingertip. Not above or below it, just directly where my fingertip is. Now, to do the cutting, I grabbed my Dremel and I equipped it with their number 543 cutting and shaping wheel. For the cut on the side, it's really important to have a steady hand. I'm cutting pretty close to where the center bar meets the side, but I'm leaving just a little bit of room for error and refinement later on. Note that on the top edge, I'm not starting in the corner because the cutting wheel will hit the bumper, so I'm starting a couple inches away from that area. Once the cut is started away from the corner, it's just a matter of cutting along the line that I just showed you in the previous clip. Then, to connect up the sides and top cuts, I'll flip the bumper around so I can get a good angle of approach and get to the corner that way, but be mindful not to cut too deep here. Afterward, the middle part of the bumper can now be lifted out and thrown away. That's a nerve-wracking cut to make, so let's just take a moment to collect ourselves and pick off some of those burnt plastic bits. Some of these plastic bits might be stuck to the bumper as it cools down from the cutting, and that's normal and can be sanded down later. Okay, let's dive back in and take an up-close look at the side area near the top. I mentioned I stayed away from the edge a little bit, and now I'll make a perpendicular cut from the previous cut and perform it from behind the bumper. What I'm doing here is shaving off the area that would be unpainted and trimming it up to the painted part of the bumper. The bumper that I'm using for this install is actually unpainted, which is why the different areas may not be so obvious. At this point, we have a little bit of a thickness mismatch on the bumper side view. To remedy this, I'll use a tape line and slowly fade the area we just cut down to the lower of the bumper side tabs. The upper side tab will be cut out during this process, but what we're going to be left with is a nice clean transition on the side. Depending on the cutting wheel speed, you might have some roughness on the side and top edge. Starting with some 180 grit sandpaper and refining it down to about 400 grit will get a nice smooth edge. This is an important step of showing off a clean cut that you can spend a lot or a little time on depending on how perfect you want to get it. After you have the bumper sanded, it's mesh time, and here's the piece that we have for sale on our website. This is pre-cut and pre-bent, just like how I show here, and it's finished off with a gloss black powder coat. Also, we have you covered with a hole for tow hook access, and that's been lined with some rubber trim. To fit the mesh piece in, let's temporarily put the upper grill back on the bumper for some stability. And let's also give the mesh piece a little bit of a curve so the middle is sticking out a little bit. The upper corners may need to be flexed back a little bit as well. This mesh is very sharp, so please use caution when handling. And if need be, use some protective gear such as leather gloves while performing this step to avoid injury. The mesh can now be placed on the back of the bumper with the bent parts on the lower edge facing forward and the bent parts of the upper edge facing back towards the engine bay. Once in position, I like to snap in one of the side bumper tabs first and then work my way around the bottom edge. Again, this mesh is sharp, so use caution while doing this step. As I work my way around the lower part of the bumper, it will get increasingly difficult to get the bumper tabs to snap over the mesh. You may need to firmly pull the bumper in a direction or two to get the mesh seated in properly all the way around, and these are intended to be a snug fit. The top area might not be aligned up properly right now, and we'll take care of that shortly, so just prop it up for the time being. Here's a top-down view of the front of the lower edge. We want to have the mesh right up against the back of the bumper like so before moving forward. Then work the upper corners flush from both the front and back of the bumper. Some additional work in shaping the mesh to hit just right in the corners may be needed. And from the back, I'm going to push the upper edge of the mesh upward until it's making contact with the bumper. This is the last time I'll mention it, but these edges are sharp. Be careful when you're near the edge of this mesh. The center part here can ever so slightly have a small gap depending on how you're holding the upper grille assembly. Don't get me wrong, I want to have good contact here, so I'll go ahead and push the mesh up if needed. But depending on the tilt of this upper grille area, the emblem at this point may raise or lower just a little bit. Once satisfied with the mesh fit, remove the upper grille once again. Let's grab just a small handful of cable ties now. I'll run these through the mesh near the top edge and through the tabs where the upper grille clipped into. These ties are needed to keep the mesh in place while we bond the mesh to the bumper. Ideally, we want the face of the mesh to be flush with the cut of the upper edge. If you can get it a little bit more forward, then that's great. From time to time, also make sure that these ties aren't positioned in a way that the lower edge of the mesh has popped out in any way, or that the upper grille edge is distorted. Odds are, like me, you'll have a gap in these upper corners. To fix this, I'll use a dowel or a stick of sorts to bridge the top edge and side edge of the bumper. This will give us something from the front to tie the mesh to and pull the mesh forward so it can be flush with the back of the bumper. Also, to protect the finish of the bumper, I'm using some foam pads between the bumper and the stick. Once satisfied with the placement of the mesh, you can safely cut off the tail ends of the ties and throw them away. To bond the mesh and bumper together, I'm going to use PlyoGrip Plastic Repair number 3. Some other adhesives such as automotive goop can be used, but only if you have experience in managing it so that it doesn't run everywhere. A plastic bumper focused 2-part epoxy is going to give us the best results though. As you can see, I'm dispensing this on the area where the mesh and bumper are coming into contact. With this top edge, I especially want to make sure that none drips through the front of the bumper, and I'll periodically brush over the application to even it out and guide it so that there's not any spilled through the front. To ensure a good bond, I like rolling just a little extra to the back and then brushing it around. Having an extra surface plane to bond to will give us some more strength to the install in the long run. The top part of the sides will just have a flat mesh making contact with the back of the bumper, and applying the adhesive directly on the mesh and through to the bumper will work well. As the mesh starts to get that 90-degree bend on it, you'll need to angle the dispensing tube so that it's making contact in the corner of the bumper. While the bumper tabs are holding the mesh in tight, we want to make sure that this is attached even more securely. Work your way around the whole bumper with the adhesive, and while that's curing, let's take another look at the top grille. Let's flip it around and disassemble it so we can black out the chrome. Start by undoing the fasteners and clips that are holding the chrome trim on, and then set it off to the side when it's released. The emblem will likely require a couple cuts on the posts near the washers that are holding them on. That should be all that's needed to get this to come off. With the pair of them here, I'll use a Scotch-Brite pad to give them a little bit of a scuffing. This will help with paint adhesion and hopefully give us a long-lasting paint job. To do the painting, I'll use the Spray Max Primer Filler, and then shortly after I'll give it a shot of the Spray Max Trim Paint in matte black. These dry fairly quickly, and I can put them back on the upper grille without waiting too long. The emblem in this case will require a small amount of adhesive to hold it in place since we previously cut off those posts. Once the bumper adhesive is cured, cut off the ties with some wire cutters and remove any foam or props that were used. The newly blacked out upper grille can be reinstalled and the mod is now complete. Considering what we started with, this is a drastic difference that changes up the look of the front end quite a bit. Here's an install by an owner who's taken the plunge and done the mod themselves. It's truly a fresh look for these non-turbo Velosters. Well, this has been a fun and challenging install, but that about does it for this video. I hope you liked it and found it to be useful. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments below, and thanks for watching.